From the flight deck of the astral plane, this is your Captain Starpilot33, checking in with flight log number 15. Finally! Where have I been, right? It's been 7 months since my last trip, and I'm more overdue than I think I ever have been before. Why? Well, like I keep saying, life keeps making it harder and harder to do this. I take these trips very seriously, and everything needs to be go for launch, with no overlooking of potential problems that I should have dealt with beforehand. Since February, it's been a battle with co-pilot Kat's health and Romeo too. It took months to get him back on track, and then when I finally did, he managed to pick up a parasite even though he's an indoor cat. He must have eaten a bug that carried worms or something because he deteriorated so fast it was alarming. He was down to 9 pounds on his big frame and he looked horrible. Anyway, there was no way a trip was happening with all that going on. This trip wasn't going to be ordinary by any means, and I knew it. In fact, I was a little spooked, and rightly so. The plan was to do 4.6 grams of turbo PE, gifted to me by the same friend that gave me the 4 grams of turbos that produced the upgrade trip in flight log number 4. To recap that, in case you haven't seen that one, turbos are PE that have been cultivated to be extremely high in psilocybin and psilocin. It was said that the cultivator only cloned and kept fruits that tested above a certain level of potency and just kept growing those to create a very, very potent variety of PE that I named turbos after flight log 4 because PE are high performance enough. But these are all that with extra warp drive that can surprise you even when you're experienced with PE in general. This video will incorporate some of the recordings that I made before and during the trip to supplement the narration. So many of you enjoyed my live rantings on flight log number 14. I figured it's a good way to capture the essence of the trip first person rather than trying to remember and type it all out the next day. So here's a clip from a few days before the trip, a midnight rant and musing about what was ahead. So this is before the trip. I can't tell you how many times I have postponed or otherwise canceled this trip this year. All I can say is, what a decade this year has been. I don't know what to say other than it's been ridiculous. Every time I've tried to schedule a trip, it's been, I'm not well, the cats aren't well, the neighbors are partying, you know, there's a disturbance in the force, like whatever. There's something every time. Tonight, I have a pounding headache that feels like I have a African drum circle in my head, okay? And this was the perfect evening with neighbors that have finally shut up, and yet, despite everything being perfectly ready, I cannot because my head is killing me. But everything else is great. Everything is prepped and ready to go. In fact, I've gone through this entire house like a tornado and donated probably 3 carloads of stuff to Goodwill. I mean, this is a little tiny house too, so to donate that much stuff, there was just like a need to go through and declutter my existence in a big way and remove things that just had old stagnant energy, and I think that was part of what was holding me back from, I don't know, not just tripping, but everything in general. This has been like the grand purge of 2024. So when it comes to this trip, I know this is a big one. I keep hearing in my head that phrase that the drill sergeant said. Was it on flight log 6? Oh, God, watch that one again if you need a recap. That you won't have to take this level again for a while. Well, it's been a technical while, and I have a feeling this next trip is it. And I mean, it's 4.6 grams of turbo PE, which is the same stuff that created flight log number 4 where I had the upgrade, and also a little bit with that first edible where there was some turbo PE honey in it. But anyway, these are no joke. I know it's a lot. I know I need this right now. I need it really bad. But I also know it's nothing to mess around with or go in sort of half-assed. So I'm like cleaning up everything. I'm just really trying to get everything decluttered and remove old stagnant energy from me and the house and everything. So it's not happening yet. But when it does, and I don't know how it's gonna go, and this is recorded before then, but the message I've gotten from the corner of the room where I know that green light normally is, when I've looked up there from time to time, is when you're ready, you'll come. And when you do, it's gonna be beautiful. So just don't worry about it. Just get here. And so that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm hoping for. And that's what I'm hyping myself up for. So that had me worried enough to get my shit in order before doing this. Worried about what? A rough night? Yeah, because I've been so tired lately from dealing with all the other things in life that the idea of going through a rough, exhausting night and then being wiped out all day the next day, and then back to work on Monday with a script to write and a video to spend 20 to 30 hours making was exhausting just thinking about it. And I published another book in May, and that required hundreds of hours of work on the computer just to put it all together once the content was done. I was burned out with Adobe programs and didn't even want to think about opening Photoshop or Premiere Pro. But I feel better now after a long rest from all that and ready to create again. I know I could always just trip and skip the video, but I feel like making the video and sharing the experience is valuable to those who listen, but also it honors the trip in a way that I can look back on it and return to it in the future. As always, I'd picked a fight song for this trip to get me motivated, and this time it was I'm Coming Home by Skylar Grey. And how incredibly relevant that song would be for this trip. 6 p.m., back home from the farm. Cats are fed and medicated, neighbors finally quiet. I had no excuses. I felt okay. The house was staged and protected. My table of special items was ready, and all I had to do was eat that cake filled with 4.6 grams of powdered turbos mixed with vanilla frosting. As I sat there looking at it, co-pilot Cat jumped up on the table, interested in whatever I was about to eat, as always. Sorry, buddy, this isn't for you. You can trip without it. The hardest part was that first bite. After that, you're committed. There's no going back. I'm just not used to stuff that's this sweet, so it was hard to finish it all, but I did and chased it down with some orange juice, which totally grosses me out now since I associate it with the taste of washing down mushrooms. Now there was nothing to do but wait. It was still light out and the sun was not due to set for another hour. Launch time was 6:30 p.m. I wanted to start early in case this went late like the last turbo trip. Turns out that was a smart idea. I wouldn't say that these violently yanked me under like some of my own PE tend to do. It was more of a heavy sinking feeling. Some anxiety, not too bad. I knew what it was and I knew it would pass. I closed my eyes early and tried to pick up on some of the faint early messages on the come up. I'm glad I stopped distracting myself with movies and music long ago during this phase because there are some great things there on the edges of a trip just as the tide starts to come in. The first thing I saw were these shining people, and I knew that these were the same group, if not the same exact entities, that did the upgrade in Flight Log 4. I asked if I needed another upgrade, and was there something wrong? And they said they were just there to check on a few things. I don't know what they did, but it felt like they opened up my head and plugged some stuff in to take some readings or something. I just stayed still. Am I okay? I asked. You're fine, they said. I don't know why you keep thinking you aren't. They seemed quite happy with whatever they tested and found, and it was over as quickly as it began, and they were on their way. That scene faded, and then I was flying over a clear blue-green ocean with calm seas. The sun was above, shining down so that I could see through the water to the bottom, and I remember being told about a river that flows under the sea, within it yet separate. It's made of different water than the sea, and the sea doesn't disperse it. Both are part of the other and yet separate with different purposes. The river has a source and a destination, and the voice was telling me to seek the river and where it goes. Let it show you the source. I felt like the narrator was someone ancient, indigenous, and very wise. and the theme of the underwater river appeared again and again that night. I awoke from that brief dive, and it was still light in the room. I could barely make out the green glow on the ceiling where ME hung out, and the glow of the surge protector strip lights reflecting on the ceiling. Before I forgot all of that, or became too incapacitated to operate my phone anymore, I made a recording, basically just repeating back to ME what I was just told. I felt like that river beneath the sea represented love or something like that, but I was barely dipping my feet in the water now, so the thoughts came in flashes and nothing was clear for more than a moment.
Live from outer space. These are some powerful PEs. Clearly PE though. You can see the vibe on these. Oh, the yawns. These make you yawn, don't they? I remember this. Hi, Mr. Co-Pilot Cat. You look awesome tonight. So what is this? Alright, recapping quickly. There is a river within the sea that flows apart from it, yet is part of it. This is that deep shit, right? That you're talking about. Okay, yeah, I know. This is a real thing now. I mean, like in our dimension, yes. I know. I've heard of rivers that flow inside bodies of water. The point being that they have a direction. Unlike some people, right? Unlike some people, they actually have a direction, right? There's a purpose and a direction that they're going, and so do I. This reminds me of the river from Flight Log 6. Oh, God, the yawns on these, you know? Okay, so this is not a repeat of Flight Log 6. Yes, however, these do have some heat. I can feel it. These are no joke. No joke. We've already talked about that. Oh, gosh, yes, the river that flows within the ocean. The great part is, like he said, and I've heard this before, he said, the perfection is in the imperfection, because a perfect universe is a dead universe. It can't grow. And so if we're talking philosophy here tonight, which if we're philosophizing on this many turbos, this is great. Aristotle would be so proud. That means God is imperfect by design. He didn't design himself, but he has to be to grow, to create. He just said in our conversation, I quote, he just said, create as I create. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. We are closest to the creator when we're being an iteration of, like a fractal expression of when we're creating anything. Create as I have created. Yeah. That's the best way to pray. The best way to pray is create as I have created. Yeah. Through the expression of creating anything, you are in direct contact with God. By design. How cool is that, man? Anytime you want to, yeah, it's just the fact that you can create anything at all, independent of yourself. That's a prayer when you do that. How cool is that?
Create as I have created was the message there. When we create anything, we're emulating the creator who created all of this. So the expression of any creation, whether it's music, art, cooking, crafts, building, inventing, anything we make is a kind of sacred prayer when we create something from within ourselves. And you can take that analogy and run with it wherever you like, but it still holds true, even in discussions of good and evil, since the presence of each defines the other and allows the other to be understood. It was 7:30, apparently. An hour went somewhere, and when I opened my eyes to try to talk to Ami, everything was shaking in my vision, and all I wanted to do was close my eyes again. The air conditioner kicked on. Everything was quiet outside, but the sound of the air conditioner and the cat water fountain motor began to coalesce and combine their sounds. PE is always a very oral variety, I've found, and there's lots of engine noises, especially in the beginning when the ships show up, and that's exactly what happens. The noise, vibration, pulsing sounds and chattering, warbling and rumblings of the low frequencies mixed with the high frequencies in a strange kind of music. Then there were lights and stained glass shimmering of rainbow lights and prisms everywhere as the ships landed. They were huge, as they always are, glowing and radiating light and energy. They reminded me somehow of rides on the midway of the fair at night, just an overwhelming conglomeration of light and sound and motion with the presence of a celestial palace, or like I always say, like being in a casino at Vegas with the polished stones and glimmering lights and crazy patterns. And yet these aren't things or places, they're beings, if you can wrap your mind around that. Then I was among a group of people that also seemed to glow. They were human-looking, men and women all smiling and happy to meet me, and they said something about my travels and partnership with the spaceships was so rare and special, and I remember saying something like, well, I'm 33, so there's at least 33 of us out there, likely many more. I've met several other star pilots during my adventures. That scene faded along with all their faces, and a new scene unfolded in some sort of a large, vaulted, auditorium-like classroom. And there was discussion of the design of the ships, and since I'm always interested in that, I noticed how there wasn't a single congruent angle anywhere, no symmetry. Every inlet or vent was asymmetrically oblong and yet still looked perfect somehow. I was reminded of the wisdom from past trips where I was told that a perfect universe is a dead universe, and that the perfection is in the imperfection since it's what allows growth and expansion. When something cannot grow or expand anymore, it decays and dies and returns home. Objects on Earth are often built with a degree of symmetry and perfection in mind because that's what works in this 3D world. But objects we build will eventually decay, just like some of the objects disintegrating in my closet that I had to throw out. This discussion about the spaceship design led me back to that engineering school again. You know, the one that I've visited at least 3 times now, where for hours and hours it's lectures and labs sitting in a literal auditorium trying to comprehend stuff that's right at the ragged edge of my ability to grasp it over there. Forget about over here. I can barely type out what happened, let alone explain what we keep discussing in that class, which is like 1 part physics, 1 part geometry, 1 part abstract art, and 1 part neurobiology, and another part philosophy. I was thirsty. My mouth was parched, and I was trying to limit the water because I knew the nausea came on strong around the 3rd to 4th hour, and we were only in the 2nd to 3rd hour. I stepped into the hallway to get some water and take a break, where I made a couple more recordings. I was just being silly at this point. Everything was funny. That changed further in, but for now, I was just enjoying the ride and feeling pretty good about the fact that this was a turbo trip and not nearly as bad as Flight Log 4. Going home was a big theme on this trip, and what it means to go home. The class I was in started talking more and more about the concept that death as we know it is nothing more than going home. No different than going home for Christmas or going home after a long week of traveling for work. We talked at length about how society has made it into this huge sad event because to us the person isn't here anymore. But it's like having a family reunion on the beach and then it's time to go home and one person leaves first and gets back to the house before you arrive and they're there waiting for you to get there. That's it. Everyone is eventually going home and some people leave first and have better luck in traffic and get home first. And they'll have the garage door open and the lights on when you get there. I had to step out of class again to make a recording in the hallway. Talk to me again before I forgot all this stuff.
Hang on, class notes here. This needs to be recorded. This is serious shit. Okay, we're in... I've got my 5D brain on here, so I'm trying to comprehend what you're saying. Talking about death and how death is a loving force. And it's about going home. That is not the end of anything. It's going home. There's nothing wrong with going home. Okay, this is where it gets deep shit. So you're saying every time I go home to my parents' house, right? I'm going home. That I could have been killed in a car accident many years ago and would have just gone home. I would have, there's no difference between death and going home. So whether that actually happened or not, I mean, we are in another dimension right now discussing this. And all different possibilities exist. There's a possibility. There's a reality where I could have been killed in a car accident on the way home. And I would have never known because I would have gone home. And there's a reality where my parents just, I arrived home, fine. And there's a reality where I didn't. Just like what happened to my coworker, where he's here and his daughter is dead, but you're saying she just went home. That she didn't have any idea that she died. You're saying she had no idea. There's no transition. There's no way to know. It's just going home. That's all it is. There's no final. There's no Reaper. There's no like Nazgul that shows up with a fucking scythe, right? You just go home. It's like a welcoming party. So if you died in a car accident, you would just pull into your parents' garage and you think you went home. I don't know what happens after there. That's the mystery. But what's cool is you're saying there's no difference between dying and going home. To the caveat being to a home that's welcoming. You wouldn't want to go home if it's someplace that's horrible. But I'm just saying, like, you're going home to a welcoming place that's full of love. So, in this multidimensional reality where I am right now, I can see how it is possible. On some trip home, I didn't make it home, but I thought I did. I have memories of making it home. Everybody was fine at home. But I can see how, oh God, here we are. When you're on this side and you can see all the all the different threads, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen because I had to go to work the next day or whenever. Okay, this is deep shit. This is the deepest shit there is. This is the deepest shit there is. No kidding. And I'm on a break from, I'm talking in the hallway right now with me. This isn't even in class.
I remember learning that the Egyptians believed that the most important thing that you could do in life was die. And that's why they made such a colossal deal about honoring the dead and making sure that they had all the items they needed in the afterlife with them in the tomb, even their mummified pets. But I don't think it's really correct to say that they believe that the best thing that you could do in life is die. It's like the best thing that they could do in life is go home. Go home to where you know home is, the source of love. It implies that you have to understand yourself to know that you're loved and to come from a place of love and that you found your way back to that place. Life was hard back then. Famines and wars and diseases. Lots of reasons to feel like every day was a long, hot walk in the desert far from home. But I get the feeling that the ancient cultures had a much better grasp on it all than we do today. Today, when so many people are terrified that it's the end, as if anything ever ends, and that some scary black-robed figure, literally invented by humans in the 14th century during the plague in Europe, will show up to haul you away. That, as I said in the recording, it seems like the best outcome in any possible situation is to go home, literally, figuratively, metaphorically, or otherwise. And the worst possible outcome, when the game is over, all hope is lost, the road has come to an end, is you go home. The shit was deep at this point, and I was told I needed to pay attention in class and not be distracted with recordings of the outside world, because while I was having fun so far, I still had a night ahead of me, and it was serious. And that was me saying that. It was around 9:30 or so, and I texted my dad goodnight rather than wait for his text around 10:30 or so. It sounded like I'd be pretty busy by then. So I closed my eyes and was taken back on a recap of my life through grade school, third grade classes, playing in the woods, college classrooms. Then there was work and so many students and trips and lessons and places to go, and I relived this really bad accident that almost happened. We were going at a pretty high rate of speed and hit some ice, and were sliding out of control, pointing at a 45-degree angle left up straight ahead, and tracking off the right side of the pavement. I told the person next to me to brace for impact because we were out of control, and then it stopped. We stopped heading right and started sliding back toward the middle again, against every law of physics. We were still pointed 45 degrees to the left, but stopped right in the middle, still on the ice. I could never explain how we didn't crash that day. Nothing was there to cause the wheels to gain traction, let alone track back the other way to the middle. I always said it must have been 10,000 angels that pushed us back to the middle. But now, as the trip began to really ramp up and the fractured reality began to become apparent, I realized with me and someone else there, as I watched the accident about to happen, that I was watching it from behind a translucent material like glass, but it wasn't solid. I realized that I was the one who stopped us from going off the pavement, from over here. Even though that was 20 years ago, and many years before I'd ever tripped, I realized that I'd been the force unseen, infinite, and unknown that's come to my own rescue again and again because I found my way here. It was clear the writers of Interstellar had done this and been exactly here in this place. But by what authority do I have to affect these things in my own life when other people can't? I said. You have the authority of any student who's showed up for class, the voice said. By showing up to learn, you have the right to use what you've learned for your own growth and expansion. I was trying to wrap my head around what might have happened if I'd never jumped into the unknown and taken mushrooms for that first time. Would I have crashed that day? Is it because time isn't linear and everything that can happen has happened in some iteration of reality because it was known that someday I would travel here and on that day that crash didn't happen? I looked at the clock and it was 10 p.m. I was getting late waves of nausea. Usually they start around 9 to 9:30, but it was coming on later. The cats were sleeping. Co-pilot stood watch over me on the coffee table next to the couch, which I pulled close so that he could be right next to my head. He sat there looking down on me and occasionally would pat my face with his paw gently or tap my head. He was definitely at work all night. He didn't want to be touched, as usual, but occasionally came over and wanted kisses and nose rubs. Most of the time he just sat there looking down on me, purring rhythmically, and the sound was comforting, especially during the hardest parts of the trip. Romeo snuggled with me for a while too, and Church was sound asleep on my feet, dreaming, twitching, and talking in his sleep. He seemed to be on a trip also. My body felt hot. My hands were burning. My joints hurt. Everything hurt. My neck, my shoulders, elbows, wrists. Everything was sore and burning. I was sweating like crazy, even with the air conditioning blasting all night. My hair was soaked and stringy, and it was clear that these turbos were not going to quit. I was ready to come down, but there was no hint of that anywhere. I asked if I could turn on my phone and make one last recording. It was around 11:45, and I was still battling hard. I made the recording and turned the phone back off.
Okay. I knew what we were getting into when we did this. That's why I delayed so long. These are late bloomers. They don't peak when you think they are. I would not recommend this unless you're gonna strap yourself to the fucking mast of the ship and come hell or high water, if it sinks or not. If you strap yourself to that bowl for 8 seconds, whatever, if you don't ride this thing out, you're going down. This is hard. Physically, mentally, I'm sweating. I'm soaking wet. I've cried a river. The Dramamine helped a lot. But I'm getting waves, and we are, 6-7 hours in. This is rough. I knew it would be. I mean, we're talking 4.6 grams of turbos here. I knew what I was in for. And I just would say I would not recommend this to anybody unless they are totally willing to ride this thing all night, forward unto dawn. What I learned is that the captain's only able to be on the sea at all because of this ship. If it weren't for this ship, there's no way the captain could even stand in that spot at all. And if the sea takes the ship with the captain on it, so be it. You go home. And if the sea doesn't take the ship, and you ride it through till morning, and you get through the other side, you still go home. Either way, you go home. The worst thing that could possibly happen in any situation played out to the very worst is you get called home. The best possible outcome in any situation is you go home. To the place where you're loved, the destination, that's like the best outcome. You go to home, you know? There's like no difference. There's like zero difference between the worst outcome and the best outcome. Either way, you return home. The means to get there is irrelevant. Whether it's going down in flames, whether it's sinking ship, whether it's exploding on the highway, whether it's getting there safely, either way you go home. That's why I like baseball so much. The whole point is to go home. It doesn't matter where you are or what base you're on, the whole point is to go home. And when I'm not at home, all I want to do is go home. So this is like, this is my salute to James Earl Jones too. You know, Field of Dreams. Let's all just go home, right?
What do you think about all this? A voice said. It was the drill sergeant from Flight Log 6. You asked for this level again and you got it. Yes, I did, I agreed. I'm fighting hard, but it's okay, I said. This can be the best trip of your life or the worst trip of your life. It's up to you, Captain, he said. I said I was going to strap myself to the mast of this thing and ride it until dawn, until we go home. He said, carry on, exactly as you are. I saluted and he said, and that salute looks much better too. Those lines are verbatim from the book I wrote. And now I'm not sure who said them first. What do you want to do, Starpilot? Emmy said. Go to bed? No, I said. This isn't over. It's not even fading. I got up to pee, barely able to walk. Turned out a few nightlights in the kitchen, then got back on the couch before the nausea hit. It seemed to hit whenever I moved my head or body too much. I want to keep going, I said, thinking about flying back out over the ocean away from land. That's fine, but at some point you'll get a return to base order, he said. Either way, I go home, whether I keep going or turn around, I said. You're crazy, you know that? Emmy said with a laugh. He sighed. Okay, suit yourself. Stay strapped to the mast, then. I rolled over on my back, propped on a pillow on my left side. I threw off the light blanket along with my shirt since it was soaking wet, and curled up, finding it impossible to find a comfortable position since my arms hurt and my neck hurt and everything else. I felt like I was in a desert at night, surrounded by elders and spirits of initiation. Night of the Warrior, I heard. And I felt like this was one of those nights when a warrior was sent to the spirit world to battle through whatever may come and arise in the morning with a new strength and wisdom. But for now, I felt like crap. It was after midnight, and this thing wasn't letting up. I closed my eyes and saw a great elephant spirit, shining with thousands of colored stones decorating its skin. And I heard lessons about safety in the herd despite their great size. And he said that the elephant is a spirit of adaptation and resourcefulness. They cannot eat from the ground like other animals because of their bodies, so they look upward for food, and they use their trunk to do above what their legs cannot do below. But even with adaptation, they still need the herd. They still need their home. Then I saw a gorilla spirit, hundreds of them, looking at me, until their faces became like round stones in a giant wall. Stay with me now, hear me out, said a voice. The gorilla faces multiplied again and again, exponentially, until the details were lost. But there was just a pattern that became a pulsating wall of another machine from the other side, an organic, intelligent, morphing structure that wanted to teach me about itself. I saw a sort of city made of crystals, and though it was unlike the one in a previous trip that was more like skyscraper buildings made of crystals, this was more of a fantasy city, and there was a round cylindrical atrium, and I was viewing it from up high. The floor was like a mirror, and the walls were like crystal reflecting the light. I'd flown there with a spaceship, the same one I'd been with all night, and we kept flying onward to ride this storm out, and I somehow understood that we were there waiting for a delegation to arrive, a group of beings that were regal, intelligent, and far beyond anything I've seen except maybe imagined in fantasy books. The leader of them arrived, and suddenly I was surrounded on this mirrored floor. All the others seemed to vanish, and it was just me and this one thin, colorful, strangely beautiful being standing there with me, and we both seemed to be encapsulated in white crystal as we spoke. "Who are you?" I asked. He rolled his eyes a little and said, "You call us machine elves." I was puzzled because what I've seen and thought were a few machine elves, I would not have given him that designation based on how he looked. Time was slowing down. Everything felt heavy, and my head felt heavy on my neck. Voices were slowing down. I asked if we could just drop the language because it was making me too tired to formulate words. He sent a torrent of thoughts and concepts at me, so many that I can't remember anything specific. But it was something about the importance of going forward no matter what. Regression happens even with a tide, but with any cycle, there has to be a return and renewing and going forward again. Then we were off on our way, the ship and I. "Who the hell was that?" I asked it. "I have no fucking clue," said the ship. I laughed. "Seriously, who was that?" I opened my eyes. Co-pilot Cat was sitting there in the dark, staring outside at the night through the sliding glass door. He was watching for something. At one point, he made a sound I've never heard him make before, like he was trying to sing. It wasn't a meow, it was a long crying sound. Not long afterward, I heard another sound, the unmistakable meowing of the orange cat next door, Benito, who comes over to visit with Co-pilot every night on the patio. He meowed and meowed. He knew something was going on in here, too. I carefully got off the couch to let Co-pilot out on the patio to visit with Benito, while I went back to tossing and turning from side to side, back on the couch again. I just couldn't get comfortable. Everything was sticky from dried sweat, the fabrics felt itchy, my skin felt itchy too. Probably a mild histamine reaction. I bet if I turned the light on, I would have had a rash on my stomach, which happened before. It was almost 1:30 a.m., and this trip was still chugging along. How many hours in am I? 7? There was no signs of slowing. This was beginning to remind me of the trippy boat ride in the Chocolate River in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. "What do you want to do, Starpilot?" Emmy asked. "I'm staying right here until this trip runs out of steam," I said. I closed my eyes, and it was bright patterns and visuals. Bright white flower of light patterns. My whole body was aching. This was grueling. I drank more water, nearly an entire 1.5-liter bottle so far. I lay there for several thousand years, not really going anywhere, still very present, but clearly tripping. I thought it must be fading now if I'm staying around more. I rolled over on my back and the AC kicked on. I meditated to the sound of it and tried not to think about anything in particular. All of a sudden, the sounds in the room melted together into a symphony of dissonance. The feeling of traveling hit again, and the visuals ramped up once more. I couldn't believe it. Nearly 8 hours in, and these turbos are still yanking me under. Vast, sparkling, pearlescent rooms trimmed in gold and rainbow light. These were the corridors and the interiors of the ship, possibly the one I was flying with all night. It was hard to tell. The deeper the trip is, the more you lose the linear storyline and the connection between the scenes and images, and it's just an amalgamation of moments leaving you to connect their meaning. I woke up. It was 2 a.m. "I'm going to bed," I said to Ami, "but this isn't done yet. I'm still on the mast." "You're a crazy one, Starpilot," Ami said. "I know," I said. "I love you, Ami. Thank you for everything tonight and as always." "I love you too, Starpilot. Good work tonight. Don't stay away too long." "I don't intend to. I never intend to, and yet it's always that way." "Well, maybe not this time. We'll see." Now I cleaned up all the cat food bowls, let Co-pilot back in, turned off the remaining night lights, and headed for bed. I looked in the mirror and my pupils were still dilated. I was still tripping after all this. I got in bed and found it impossible to get comfortable. Right before I went to sleep, I heard a voice say, "Time to return to base, Starpilot." I said, "I want to keep going until morning." The voice was the spaceship. "Well, I'm out then. I'm going home. It's been a fun ride, but it's as far as I can take you. Everyone's going home." Okay, it was over. Everyone's going home. Time to come down off the mast. Only there was no coming down. The boat was gone. The storm had taken it, and I was floating, tied to the mast, on the surface of the calm sea. I let my eyes close again and let the river take me back to the source. I wasn't sure if I was still lightly tripping or actually sleeping, but I knew my watch would let me know when I finally fell asleep. You can't fall asleep until that trip is totally done, and according to my watch, I fell asleep at 2:35 a.m. That was a full 8-hour trip. Needless to say, I woke up at noon, and had to immediately shower, wash my hair, wash all the blankets, bedding, clothing, everything that was soiled during the battle, fed and medicated the cats, made breakfast, and started writing this down. I'm glad I took this last opportunity to take a ride with these turbos. There was a thought to maybe make them last and see these are the very last of them, but then we'd never know what would happen if I just ate the whole damn thing, right? Do it for science and report back in the morning. What's the worst that can happen? You wake up in the morning back at home. Thank you for coming with me on this intense and challenging journey. I look forward to your messages, emails, and DMs. You can email me at starpilot33@protonmail.com or find me on Instagram at starpilot33. Until next time, keep going forward, onward, through the night, and I'll see you on the other side.